Allison on the program. Thank you for being on the show today, Donnie.
It's my pleasure.
Now, when you're growing up, starting out racing in Florida and everything, I'm sure the last thing on your mind was being called a racing legend by somebody as myself interviewing you.
Well, I never thought of it like that. It's, you know we were very fortunate in what we did in racing, Bobby and myself both, and I was lucky enough to win a lot of short track races in my early career and then go on and win 10 Winston Cup races. So I had a really good career and I really enjoyed it.
Now, it was yourself, your brother Bobby, Red Farmer, all you guys from the Florida area came up to Alabama. What led you to Alabama? What was it about Alabama? The water? What was it?
Well, not really. We at that time raced like at Hialeah Speedway on Saturday night and maybe West Palm Beach once in a while on Sundays. Twice a month, I think, is what they ran. And some friend of ours came up to Alabama racing, and they came back and told Bobby, I found a place to race. You can race 4 nights a week. And it's just unbelievable. So Bobby said to me, he said, "You want to go to Alabama?" I said, "Let's go." So I left my car in Florida with Eddie, my older brother. I was in amateur division at that time, and we left down there and went to Alabama. And lo and behold, the two guys, it was Gil Hearn. He raced up north for a long time. People know him, and a guy named Kenny Andrews. They got a little bit of a squabble, and Gil quit on a Friday night really, but then Saturday night he didn't show up in Montgomery, and Kenny didn't have a car there. A driver there, a car, and he asked Bobby, "Who should I get to drive my car?" And he said, "Well, let Donnie drive it." So I started that night at Montgomery, Alabama, driving my first modified race, and I never got back in my own amateur car when I got back to Florida. And I went back and forth for 3 or 4 years before I finally moved to Alabama to stay.
Now, a lot of people are familiar with the success of your brother, but a lot of people are also very high on Donnie Allison. A lot of people have mentioned you as one of the great drivers in the history of NASCAR.
Well, I was fortunate because, like I said, I won 10 races, but I only ran 240 races. I never ran a complete full season of 30 or 34 races or whatever it was for a particular season. I felt like if I'd have got in a car, a good factory car that ran for the championship, I more than likely could have won the championship. I won numerous short track racing. I went to Indianapolis twice. I ran 4th the first year, 6th the second year, which was a very good finish for somebody that drove stock cars. And I didn't run as many Winston Cup races as a lot of the guys did, but I did have a very good career.
Now, you mentioned Indianapolis. What took you to the Indy 500?
Well, actually, it started out as a little bit of a joke, I guess, with A.J. Foyt. I kept saying, "When are you going to let me run Indy?" And one time I said it, he said, "You really serious?" I said, "Yes." So he said, "Come to Houston and let's talk about it." So I went to his shop out in Houston, and he had a 68 model Eagle car sitting on a big rack in the back of the shop. He said, "If you want to run, get that car down. You and Dad, his father, can put it together." So we did, and that's how I went there.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what happened in the race there, and maybe some of the similarities and differences between the stock cars and Indianapolis.
Well, the cars are absolutely different. I mean, there's nothing you can even really compare, but they're both race cars, and you drive them with a steering wheel, and I really like the Indy car. And in 1970, I was real fortunate because during the race, I got in a real tight race with Mario Andretti and Bobby Unser. And we passed each other back and forth probably for 15 laps. And then I finally got ahead of both of them, was able to stay there. And I'll never forget after the race, A.J. Watson, which was Bobby Unser's crew chief, came around to A.J. Foyt's garage where I was and walked in and motioned A.J., "Sorry about your bad luck. I want to talk to Donnie." And he come over and congratulated me. And he told me then, he said, "You're the only guy that drove a stock car that he saw could drive one." He said, "It made me feel real good." And I mean, I enjoyed it. I only ran the 2 years, and I would have liked to win back, but I actually taught myself out of a ride because I told Foyt if he wanted to win 4 times, he better concentrate on his car.
You were a salesman in the negative. Now,
that's really the way it was. I knew that he wanted to win bad 4 times, and I told him, I said, "If you want to win the 4th one, you better concentrate on that one car, not run 3 or 4 cars." And so the next year he was going to do that in '72, and He went up there and right out of the box, he ran good. So he put 3 cars in the race anyway, and I talked myself out of a ride.
The people you've driven for is a veritable who's who of car owners. A.J. Foyt, you've driven for the Wood Brothers, Hoss Ellington in the Hawaiian Tropics car, Banjo Matthews. A lot of people, though, remember you best for the Hawaiian Tropic car, even though you want to race backwards in Banjo's car. You have a little model car out by MPC with the Wood Brothers. You've had a lot of different car owners, a lot of successful different car owners.
Well, and I was fortunate because I won a race in the Woods Brothers car, right at Talladega. I won 3 races with Banjo. I ran 5 with Hoss, and I had the opportunity to drive for good people. And like I said, all the people that I raced for, the Woods Brothers, Banjo Matthews, and Hoss Ellington, they ran limited schedules. They never ran for a whole championship year until the last few years. Did the Woods Brothers run every race? You know, they ran a limited schedule with David Pearson. And so, for whatever reason, I just never did run the full year with any one team.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the 1978 Atlanta race at the end of the year. I believe it was a season finale at the time. I don't think they were running Riverside yet, but when Richard Petty was flagged the winner, Dave Marcus was flagged second, but you had claimed you'd won the race.
Well, actually, what happened that day is I did lose some laps in the pit when I've been a fender all in, but I made 2 laps up in the period of 6 laps, and I was leading the race on the last restart. Excuse me, Dave Marcus was leading the race on the last restart. Richard Petty came up and he tried to pass me off of turn 2, and I moved over against the wall and motioned for him to get behind. And I told Hoss on the radio, I said, I'm gonna win this race, Hoss, so you better get NASCAR straightened out. I mean, I knew where I was and they knew where I was. And when the race restarted, Dave Marcus said he didn't worry about me, he wanted to race Richard. Well, he couldn't race me. I don't care what he says, he couldn't race, nobody could race me. Richard couldn't race me or anything else. The only car that day that could have raced me was Buddy Baker. And when he blew up, it's when I got my first lap back. And then I got my next lap back on the restart 6 laps later when Rich Childers spun out on a restart. We got a green flag, and down the back straight we got the caution back out. That's how I made it 2 laps up. All right, after the race was over, I went to victory lane. Well, then they said Richard won. Then they said I won. And you know, I told them I don't care what they said. I knew I won the race. They better go with the scorecard. And it got into a pretty heated thing that night. And I do have a little bit of a temper, I guess. And I figured I better go to Alabama before I got in trouble. But they got everything all straightened out. And finally, the next morning, they did admit that I won the race. And, you know, my reporter called me, Clyde Bolton in Birmingham. He said, "Well, they gave you the race." I said, "No, they didn't give it to me. I won it."
What's it like to win a race at home? What's it like to, instead of getting kissed by the trophy girl and the accolades and the flashes going off, what's that feel like? Because you've had them both.
Well, to be perfectly honest with you, at the time I didn't even think about it like that. I knew I won the race, and when I won the race, I felt like I did my job that day. And the victory lane and the kissing the girls and the trophies and all that, I got the trophies. So, I mean, they knew I won. It was kind of disappointing that we didn't have the big hoopla that day for all the fans that were Donnie Allison fans there, but we won the race.
And that was your last Cup race win, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you can shed any more light on the 1979 Daytona 500 on the last lap. Anything that anything that you haven't shared that you can think of? Because it's been pretty well rehashed, especially after NASCAR's 50th anniversary.
No, he just wrecked me, and I said, you know, I've said it ever since it happened. And you know, he claims I wrecked him, and I want to know how the guy in front wrecks the guy in the back. The guy in the back has the opportunity to lift his foot off the gas if he thinks it's going to be a wreck. So I didn't wreck him. I didn't do what everybody. Ken Squire did a fantastic job that day announcing that race. But he was all the way across the lake. He didn't see what was going on. He saw 2 cars wrecking. And Ken Squire did a fantastic job. It just wasn't the facts of everything that happened. And I mean, that's what I've said 100 times over and over again. I finally got to tell all the people on television and all the people on radio that the SOB did wreck me. And I mean, that's the way I feel about it.